speak this morning, but with Indian stretchable time, IST. It's now Namaskaru. Good afternoon, everybody. And I know this is a startup huddle. It's a great term. It's obviously cricket related. We always have a team huddle before we go on. There is this other thing taking place this weekend as well called the ICC Cricket World Cup final, correct? The interesting thing though is that India was born in 2015 during the IPL when I was working with Mumbai Indians, another blue team. And then Nathan was born in 2017 at the IPL. My last season with Mumbai Indians. And two things. Firstly, when people ask me about my family, and now we are actually we're living in Goa, and for the next few months we'll be living there. And people say, well, your family, children are born in India. Do they have Indian residency or anything like that? And I said, no, when our children were born, I think there were already 1.2 billion people living in India. And they said, take your children and go. We don't need your two, we have enough. So from that point of view, we love India as a family. My wife and I, she's an architect and a yoga teacher, and we love spending time in this incredible country. And I think what's always been important for me is that, yes, cricket is certainly a part of the lifeblood of India, and there is more than just a passion for the game. And yes, there are cricket gods in India. But from my perspective as somebody who visits India and is now living in India, I still think that startups and the entrepreneurial spirit that exists throughout India is the real lifeblood of this country. Because I'm always amazed by the amount of people that are finding solutions locally for local problems. And that's a lot of what startups are about. So why would you have a cricket player talking to you about startups? Let's just go back to my journey as a cricket player. And I was a batter, not a very good one, a very average batter. But at the start of my career, I literally had the World Cup in 1992. And that's the only issue I have with speaking at a startup convention like the Huddle, is that a lot of the people out there were probably maybe very young in 1992, if they were even born. So, you know, where do people know the Jonty Rhodes from? Yes, it's kind of legend, or thank goodness for the internet. You can still see images and highlights of what I used to do in the field. So my career was literally launched in 1992 when at the World Cup, which was hosted by Australia, I was playing against Pakistan, or South Africa was playing against Pakistan, and I had a run out of Inzamam ul Haq. Now you might say, well, running out Inzamam ul Haq is not very special because it happened all the time. It was at the start of his career, so we didn't know then that Inzamam was going to be a run out specialist. Slightly different to the run out specialist that I was. Because in our team talks, whenever we discuss playing against Pakistan, we always say, okay, when Inzamam gives us the first run-out opportunity, don't run him out, run the other guy, because Inzi will give us another chance later on for another run-out. So he really was a run-out specialist. But my career was launched thanks to Inzamam. His slightly slow turn in the wicket. I wasn't very good from an accuracy point of view with throwing the ball at the stumps. So I decided to run as quickly as possible, backing my strengths, which is an important part from a business point of view, not just about cricket. Playing to your strengths is something that I can really advocate about, and use my speed and get to the wicket before Inzamam got back safely. And I could see that he was getting closer and closer. In fact, he was returning faster than I anticipated. So the best way for me to cover those last 2 meters across the ground was literally to launch myself at the stumps. And a photographer took a great picture. And that picture, that image of me flying through the air, was basically then broadcast and spread around the world on the front page of newspapers, because usually the sport it's in the back page of most newspapers. But suddenly fielding, people became aware of fielding. So let's go back to my journey from a startup point of view, because fielding was already done in cricket. It wasn't very important. Batting and bowling was certainly where people would focus their attention, and we had a few all-rounders who would either bat and bowl or bowl and bat, depending on where their initial true strength lay. But for me as a fielder, I have a marketing degree, I went to university, and it really wasn't a case of me spotting a gap in the market and saying, wow, if I'm a good fielder, then people will notice me. I was a good fielder as a young boy. At school, I was already recognized as somebody who was doing things differently in the field. And from that perspective, you know, my fielding, I've seen changes throughout the game in cricket. And fielding was certainly something that I saw a change. I've seen the change happen. But the interesting thing was, at the start of my career, fielding literally was the ball coming, putting a foot out, and there was a fielding effort, or standing and asking the ball boy to please throw the ball back, because people didn't want to field when I was around. And the fascinating thing is that in an environment where I became a leader, it's easy to be the number one fielder in the world when the market only has one fielder in the world. I mean, there was nobody else who was interested in fielding. So yes, people said, yo, you're the best fielder in the world, but I was the only fielder in the world. Anyway, I'll take that credit for what it was. But the important thing there with regards to the fielding was that there were a couple of elements that made me really good in my position. And from a startup position, possibly they might help you. The first one was preparation. I mean, I was renowned for getting in test cricket. You play in white clothing. By the end of day one, in fact, by lunchtime on day one, my outfield was already brown on the knees and on the elbows from sliding around on the legs. So I was a grubby fielder. I was always in the thick of things, always in the action. I wanted the ball to come to me. So I didn't just stand at backward point. Backward point was my home ground, my piece of turf that I was dominant in. But if the conditions changed and the spinners were on, either a left arm spinner or Pat Simcox, the off spinner, I then shifted my position to be where the action is. And I think that's quite important, because when you're starting something or when you're in a business, you can't just say this is what we're doing. I don't know if there's a terminology in startup, but for me, I was a hustler. I wanted every ball to come to me. And if it wasn't coming to me, I was going to go find it and going to go fetch it over there. I wasn't just waiting for opportunity to come my way. And that was another important aspect, was that I have a father who's a school teacher, a school principal, and I'm one of 3 boys in the family. So we were a sporting family, because as a school teacher and a school principal, he also was a sports teacher, because a lot of our sport at school in South Africa took place during the day. Straight after school, it was taken care of, the different sporting codes. And my father coached the 9-year-old children at the school, because I have a younger brother, an older brother, and we were all very keen on our sport. And my father didn't want parents to point fingers and say, your sons are playing in the A team or the first team just because you are the school principal. So he was coaching the 8-year-old, 9-year-old, the first year students of our school. And he would often call me down to watch him practice with these young boys. And he said, Jonty, throughout your career, you'll see these boys here. It's summer, cricket is played in the summer. They are running around, they are dripping with sweat, they are red in the face, and they're hot and bothered. He says, but they have actually achieved very little. So just remember that it's not about practice making perfect. He said, nay, that's only half the story. He said, it's perfect practice that makes perfect. It's perfect practice. So for me now as a fielding coach during the IPL, which is the hottest time of the year in India, our practices are 2.5, maybe 3 hours long. And you've got players who are batting and bowling in this extreme heat, who now have to come work on their fielding with me, who's very energetic, and I'm hitting balls and catching, working on their fielding. 5-7 minutes, do the thing perfectly, and then move on. Because cricket is a game of habit. And when we get tired, the brain is very smart. It will always take the shortcut. It always finds a way to do things slightly easier. And that for me was so important. My father's advice was that it's not practice that's make perfect, it's perfect practice. And why is that important? Because often in a business environment, we're looking for opportunity to come our way. We're looking for that investor, we're looking for something that's going to make a difference in our business. But too often we're sitting back waiting for opportunity, and that opportunity has passed us by already. Because it's every single day. A part of my cricketing culture became the way that I practiced, not the way that I played the game. If I could put myself under the same intensity at practice, and even if, as I said, 5 or 7 minutes, then I've had a good day at the office. It wasn't about, okay, the lights are on, I've stepped over the boundary line, now I've brought my A game. Okay, it was about that perfect practice that makes perfect. It allowed me to take opportunities that other players were still thinking about. I was looking already for the opportunities before the ball was hit. Okay, so such an important part of my upbringing was that perfect practice makes perfect. Another thing, innovation. I mean, here I've had a walk through the exhibition. There's some great innovation, some incredible products that are being offered to the market or brought forward. And innovation, change is happening all around us. You know, and whether you work in a corporate environment or here in this exciting environment, change is constant. It is always there. And I've seen teams and captains and leaders and people handle change in very different ways. One is you can turn your back on it and say, that's not for us. We don't play like this, or that's not the way that we do things. The second way to handle change is to go, wow, that's a great idea. Let's do that. But the problem with that is that you're only then keeping up with the opposition or with the competition. From an innovation point of view and from a change, initiating change is what takes you ahead of the competition. It is what makes a world-beating team. It's not just about embracing change, it's about initiating change. And change is interesting, innovation is interesting, because there's not always an idea that comes out of the absolute blue, and nobody's heard of it before, no one's thought of it before, and it's a product that no one has ever seen and they're blown away by it. Innovation sometimes can be just a change in your perspective, a change in your application of what you're currently doing it slightly differently. And two examples for me. One was the fielding. As I said, I didn't do anything differently. I was still fielding. I had the same shoes on, the same clothing on. I didn't have gloves or other protection. I was exactly equipped as the other players. But my perspective, my outlook about fielding was that I loved to field. And that passion made me a better fielder than my teammates who actually didn't want to be there. Yeah, they could catch the ball, they could run for the ball, and they could slide and dive, but they didn't really want to do it. Me, on the other hand, that was my best day at the office. If I could field for 90 overs in Test cricket, I loved it. So that was innovative in that I was doing things differently, but without changing the changing the equipment that I had. And think back to anybody, the 1996 Cricket World Cup. Anybody remember the 1996 Cricket World Cup? Yeah, who won that World Cup in 1996? Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka won the World Cup in 1996. They sent out Sanath Jayasuriya and Romesh Kaluwitharanu. Now, Sanath and Kalu were two of the shortest guys in world cricket. I'm not a tall fellow, that if I had to put my arms around them, they would be kind of here. But these two youngsters were sent out with instruction. If you see the ball, hit it. It doesn't matter if you're aiming over long off or over cover. If you see it, you can hit it. And Sunneth just threw his bat, trying to hit the ball over long off, flying over third man for 6. They were sent out because what was happening at that stage was that every team had the same opening batters. There was no power play. So you didn't have to worry about the first 15 overs, people were coming hard at you in the power play. There was no power play. So standard operating procedure was your opening batters for ODI 50 over cricket were the same as Test cricket. Not very exciting. It was lay a solid platform and a foundation. So lay a foundation, and then in the middle overs we'll get guys like Jonty Rhodes, who's got good speed between the wickets, and play lower risk cricket. So first 15 overs, maximum score 45, 50 runs, but only one wicket down. Middle overs we consolidate and keep as many wickets for the last 10 overs. Then we can hit the ball and maybe get the score to 200, 220. That was a big score in 50 overs. And the Sri Lankans went, well, we tried that in 1992. We came, I think there were 9 teams in the 1992 World Cup, including South Africa for the first time. Sri Lanka were only ahead of Zimbabwe in 1992. They came 8th. And I said, what's the point of doing the same thing in 96 and hoping it's going to be different? So they sent these youngsters out to change that. They wanted to score between 75 and 90 runs in the first 15 overs. So they were almost going at 6 runs and over. And if they lost 2 or 3 wickets, they said that's fine. Because every other team is then consolidating in the middle period, and they had Aravinda de Silva, who's now just been inducted into the ICC Hall of Fame. They had Arjuna Ranatunga. Anybody remember Arjuna? Okay, so when South Africa had guys like myself and Hansi Cronje, because we had good speed between the wickets, Arjuna wasn't there for his speed between the wickets. Okay, he was a left-handed batter. Left-handed batter. Okay, well balanced, good balance. And then he would hit the ball down to third man and he would run to and then walk. And he would literally just get home safe. Used to drive us crazy. As South Africans who are decent athletes and we prided ourselves in our athletic ability, we would tell the third man, because he would, and that was the key then. You didn't have to be quick between them. As long as you could find a single, rotate the strike. And Aravinda and Arjuna were really good at that. So the Sri Lankans said, okay, we'll go hard because the building period, everyone's building. And then we'll have wickets in hand and be the same. They took the game away from the opposition. And all the other teams at that World Cup were looking for pinch hitters. We had Pat Simcox, he could hit a long ball. Sent him up once or twice, it didn't work. Okay, we'll keep with Gary Kirsten, Andrew Hudson, Kepler Wessels. Test match 1, 2 and 3. The Sri Lankans changed the way that cricket was played. And that is so important because the rest of us were embracing the change, but we were always behind them when it came to utilizing it. So embracing change is amazing, but initiating the change in the market is what is going to set you apart. And there are changes everywhere, all the time, that's taking place. I think another important aspect, and it worked with my fielding as well, was that sending out those 2 young players with this instruction to go and express yourself. If they had been sent out and after 2 matches or 3 matches, they had scored maybe 10 or 15 runs off 10 balls, or 25 or 15 balls, and then Arjuna and the selectors for Sri Lanka said, it's not working, we'll put somebody else in, that would have destroyed them. Not just the 2 batters, but the whole team as a whole. Because imagine asking you to sacrifice your wicket for the good of the team, and if it doesn't work, you then discard it. So that freedom to fail that these young batters they played with allowed them to take that risk, allowed them to not worry about getting out, allowed them to play to the best of their ability. And that freedom to fail is so important. Because whatever you're in, and whether it's at backward point or in a startup environment, freedom to fail is vital if you're going to succeed. And why? Because every time we fail, it's a step closer to getting the process right, correct? I mean, there's different ways to look at failure. I've worked in a bank in South Africa, as I said early on, and in a corporate environment, they're not looking for you to fail in anything. You know, you have certain marks that you have to, or areas of your portfolio that you have to get tick, 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 and none of us like to see failure. But it's difficult to get people to grow and grow exponentially if the concern that you have is about not making mistakes. Now you can't take it to market yet because we're not ready. How do you know that? That freedom to fail is vital. Because every mistake that we make is a step in the process towards success. And that was a big part of me fielding a backward point. Now, the ball came in my region and I would dive for it. And my teammates would sometimes say to me, they had a term for what I was doing. They would call it a TV dive. And what's a TV dive? They say, no, I would dive for the ball, and if they watched on the big screen, they would see that the ball wasn't even in the frame. It had gone past, too far from me. So Jonty, all you're doing is you diving around the field, because mothers are very important in India and South Africa. So your mother can sit and watch you at home, and she'll look at my son, isn't he amazing? He's diving, he's bleeding in India, and nobody else is even dirty. But look at Jonty, isn't he wonderful? That was my TV dive, my teammates. So they would even, they had a name for me, a nickname, the Indian Rubber Man. Because the ground in India now, since the World Cup that was first hosted in 2011, the facilities, the infrastructure around cricket are superb, world class. But in the early 90s and late 90s, it was quite tough to tour India on the outfield and on the spinning surface for a South African. So when you dived around, the Indian Rubber Man, was when I caught the ball from a diving position, I would bounce up, get ready to throw. Because I discovered that the longer you spent on the ground, the more layers of skin you would lose. But for my teammates, it was about me showing off, making them look bad. But it was my job as the fielding leader. I wasn't a captain. You don't have to be the CEO, the founder, to be a leader in an organization. You can still be somebody influencing the outcome, making important decisions and taking on a very serious role just by what you're doing and doing it with passion. But my job in the South African team then, Hansie Cronje, the captain, said, please Jonty, if you find a way to make things better in the fielding, you go speak to the player. You work on it. Now, I'm the captain of the team, but I'm busy thinking of other things. You are the best fielder in South Africa right now in this team. You fix that. That's your area. And I think maybe also something that's important for a startup environment. You can't be everything and do everything, but we have access to all of the things that are required to grow your business. So handing over that and finding people who will fulfill that role in your environment is so important. Hansie Cronje was an incredible captain. Sad what happened to him, really sad, still feel it. His dealings with bookmakers and then his death in an aeroplane crash. But he was a leader that understood that each player had a unique role to play in the team, with a unique skill, and that's the beauty of a team. And sometimes in a startup environment, you don't have a lot of people in your organization. So there might be shortfalls of skills, but you can access that everywhere or anywhere with the right guidance. Okay, so it's not about, this is what I have to control. It's releasing that made South Africa a very strong team in that time. Okay, so the last thing I'd like to end on, and especially in a country like India, and hopefully it can relate to your journey in a startup environment, and maybe to the investors if there are any here today, is that we all have egos, not just international cricket players. But yes, we like to be successful. Yes, we don't want to fail. And often that means that we stay in the areas that we're good at, because it means we're not taking extra risk, because we know we can be 100% good at this thing. But in my environment now as a fielding coach, there's two things that I look at. One is the process, not the outcome. Because the process, as I said, somebody makes a mistake, it's a part of the learning. I don't want them to stand there as a fielding coach, I'm watching from the side and the player watches the ball go past. That doesn't help me. If they dive for the ball and they drop it or miss it, I would rather see that. Because at least I know. Because if you don't go, you will never know. And sometimes that's relevant in the startup environment too. If you don't take that step or reach out and make that connection, you will never know where you could take your business. Okay, every mistake we make is a step in completing that process. But it requires honesty too. In a team, honesty is important. Not just honesty between players, but honesty to yourself. Because the perfect practice I spoke about earlier, I'm looking at a teammate in a team. I look at their process. And the process isn't just the technique if something happened in the field, is what was the process the day before, and the day before, and the day before? What was their practice like? That's a part of the process. So the players themselves, sure, we want to achieve the results, we want to be successful in taking the catch or scoring the runs, but we have to be honest with the process, because we know the outcome is not guaranteed. That's the one thing I look at as a coach. Process, not the outcome. And the last thing that I look at is ek run, one run. In a T20 match, this last IPL in 2023, 10 matches were decided on the last ball. And it wasn't just Rinku Singh with his 5 sixes. There were 10 matches, including the final, that were won on the last ball of the game. 10 games. All I ask my players in the IPL game, can you save me ek run? One run. So if the ball is heading for the boundary and you're running around and you slide and knock it back and they run 3, that ek run, that's a win. For us, that one run is a win. If you're batting and you drop, steal a single. Steal that one run. And why is it relevant? You know, we've had so many matches where one run has made the difference. If you're the bowler in that last over and you have 11 more runs to play with, so much less stress, so much less pressure. So the fielders that save one run are doing an incredible job for the team and for their teammates. And we've had games, South Africa versus Australia, semi-final of the World Cup 1999. We tied the game with Australia. Tied it 2-1-3, 2-1-3. We didn't lose. No super over then. They had a superior net run rate. They went through to the final. They thrashed Pakistan. Not that we would have won the World Cup, but we would have been in our first World Cup final in 1990. One more run. Then South Africa played in a game against Australia in South Africa. Bilateral series in Johannesburg. 434 Australia scored. Series 2-all. Deciding match. Everybody says, oh, South Africa, we were winning 2-0, we're now choking. Herschel Gibbs scores 175. Graham Smith, 90. It came down to the last over. We still needed 6 runs to win. Mark Boucher batting, but non-strikers then, on 44 not out. Andrew Hall facing Brett Lee, hits the first ball for a boundary. Now we need 2 runs to win. We are 8 wickets down. Last over, next ball he tries the same. Ricky Ponting brought all the fielders in. Andrew Hall hit the ball to a fielder, lost his wicket, and in walked Mackay Ntini. Now Mackay Ntini was a great bowler, but could not bat. So you never said number 11 batsman Mackay Ntini. You never mentioned Mackay Ntini and batter in the same sentence. It just didn't make sense for us. He really was not that good, but luckily he was scared of Brett Lee, who was bowling at 145. So Mackay backed away. He sliced the ball to third man, who was still fielding there. His one run brought Mark Boucher on strike, and Boucher had the winning runs. 434, South Africa scored 438. So South Africa won that series, not just because of Herschel Gibbs, 175, Graham Smith, 90 runs. Without Mackay Ntini's one run, it would have been a great game of cricket. But South Africa would have lost the match and the series. A fantastic game, but the wrong result. And too often we sit here and go, well, what's the importance of the smaller things? We all want to do the sexy stuff. I mean, winning a World Cup, preferably with a helicopter shot. I didn't do that right, but something like that is what we all want to do. Or the last over, bowl 2 toe-crushing Yorkers and we knock the stumps over. We want to do the sexy stuff. But sometimes it's the small things that not many people are noticing that actually makes the difference. And that can be your startup too. That can be your business. It doesn't have to be the mind-blowing, knock people out the water. It can be small things that make a difference in the community, that make a difference in homes across India, in this community and all across India too. Okay, so I think from a point of view where, yes, we like to be in the spotlight or in the headlights and we like to be capturing the headlines, that one run, those small things that a lot of people don't recognize or even notice, there's area of great growth. And I think there's opportunities that a lot of people kind of turn their back on because there's not an attention or headline grabbing activity. So if you're in a business and it's a smaller business, carry on. Don't be afraid to be in an environment that's not headline grabbing. There are investors who are looking for small, impactful businesses that make a difference in your community. And like I said, one run is often the difference between an impossible target of 434, winning or losing the game. That egg run is vital if the team is going to succeed. So find that one run where you can make a difference in your community through your business or through your own actions. All right, I see my time at the Huddle is up. There is a clock in front of me. So hopefully the stories of my cricket journey, especially around the fielding, is around innovation, about freedom to fail, perfect practice, will be relevant in your business too. So thank you very much for your time, and tomorrow, yo India.